Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Heavy Metal History. It's me, your host, Dustin. On this episode, my guest was Josh Elmore, the guitar player of Cattle Decapitation. Yes, Cattle Decapitation. One of my favorite bands, one of my gateway bands, which we discuss in this episode about how To Serve Man was such a pivotal record for me, how I found it, and what it meant to me. But much more than that, the reason Josh came on was to talk about the 20th anniversary of Humanure, which, well, happened last year when we recorded it. Due to holidays and everything, this one just got away from me and got out a little bit late, but here it is nonetheless. I mean, we still get all these amazing stories from Josh about writing and recording the album. I mean, if you want to hear about gear, this is the episode for you. Josh, we go into like every single guitar he's ever had, almost every single piece of gear he's had, what he uses now, what he recorded the album with. I mean, it is full of incredible information like that. Josh was awesome to have on the podcast. I mean, we talked for almost 2 hours. So this is a little bit of a long one, but I promise you it's worth it. There's some great stuff we cover in here. I got a lot of stories from the man himself. So without further ado, Josh Elmore, Cattle Decapitation. So, Josh, thank you for coming on the podcast, man. I definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, dude. So the thing that I would start with on the podcast is I ask about your personal heavy metal history. So those records and bands that you
hmm
remember that kind of stuck with you and like got you into the genre over the years.
Well, as a person who is approaching 50, I really I first started, it was just the radio. Like anytime we get in the car, I'd have my mom be like, turn the radio, turn the radio. And so at that time, this is 80s, early mid 80s.
Okay.
Um, and if it wasn't top 40, Michael Jackson, whatever, I mean, I had Thriller. I'm not going to say I didn't. Um, it was always Van Halen or Night Ranger or those kind of bands, just kind of hard rock bands. And I was fortunate enough, I grew up in the country, but about 35 minutes away we had a college town, or a couple, one college town and one kind of dying industrial town, and they had malls, or they had record stores or whatever. So maybe once a week, if we go into town, I would have access, with money I'd saved or whatever, to go buy cassette tapes. And the first two cassette tapes I ever bought were Van Halen's 1984 and Night Ranger's Midnight Madness. So that total, radio hard rock sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then I started buying the magazines, the Hit Parader and Circus and Hot
Yeah.
Shots and Rip eventually and all that stuff. There was this little tiny grocery store in this little town that carried those for some reason. Town of 600 people had Rip magazines. Okay. And so I just would devour those things and read them over and over. And, uh, both with I'd say Hit Parader and Rip, the parts that I ended up gravitating to the most were in the back, maybe 10 pages, there's these little ads that you could tell the person paid, hand drew it themselves and paid whatever their rate was for 1/8 of a page or 1/16 of a page. It was and it was usually just for this band's demo, or, crappy jewelry, or bootleg t-shirts or whatever. And I don't know, I just, for whatever reason, gravitated towards the stuff that looked like just horribly drawn skulls on notebooks,
Yeah.
just kind of tacky stuff that I was probably doing at school, in study hall. And so that stuff just kind of went along with oh, okay, that means you've moved, not necessarily beyond, but yeah, you've got Rat tapes, you got Twisted Sister, you got all that junk. Not junk, out of the cell rips, sorry.
Right.
But, then it's the next heaviest thing. So of course, what's the most accessible next heaviest thing? This was during thrash kind of getting to be on its feet. So of course, Big Four at the time, just four bigger bands. And, I was going through all that, and then it was always something heavier. What do you want that's heavier?
Yeah.
So then it was, of course, Slayer, and then, Dark Angel, and those kind of really aggressive thrash bands. And then, of course, it was funny, a friend of mine that growing up, his dad worked as a maintenance guy for a hotel.
Hmm.
And he brought this tape. My friend bought this tape and said, "Oh, my dad found this at work, left in one of the rooms. I listened to it. It sounds like crap to me. Maybe you'd like it." Oh, okay. And on one side was Scream Bloody Gore, and the other side was Dealing With It. So he had DRI and death. And so I would just, he wanted the tape back. I did give the tape back to him, but I would, during the time I had, I literally just would like auto reverse, just listen to those two back and back just constantly over and over. So that's what really kind of started me on the heavier stuff, and from there it's like, whatever I could afford, buy Death Records, more early Morbid Angel, Deicide, um, and I don't know, just get magazines that had like heavier stuff in it,
Yeah.
and then it just went from there to like um, whatever the death metal of the day was, and then grindcore, and then like kind of crusty punk, kind of crusty grind, kind of stuff, all that sort of the big, a lot of stuff that was, I guess now people call it scrams, or maybe 20 years ago they called it scrams or whatever, but just like super chaotic blast beat, kids scream, people screaming, just whatever was obnoxious. I was like, oh, this is great, and it took being in bands like that, after getting a guitar when I was 12, and to really kind of come around and I don't know, maybe take things more seriously and start being like, oh, I was in college, did that, got out, but then just still wanted to be in bands and didn't go to grad school, and here I am. How many years later?
Yeah, I've always wondered because like I guess I'm like a decade behind you in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like age and music and stuff. So you kind of got to see everything evolve over the years, whereas like I came
Mm-hmm.
in like at the tail end of 2000s where like
Mm-hmm.
everything had already pretty much been around for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a point in time where like you were listening to music and being like nothing's going to be heavier than this? There's no way. Like we're
Oh, I'm
at it.
sure. Yeah, I mean, that was, I'm sure, like hearing, I, I don't know if I was necessarily like, as far as the heaviness, like when I think of heaviness, there's like two things. There's like, emotionally atmospheric heavy, and then there's like literal,
Yeah,
chug chug kind of heavy. I mean,
absolutely.
I think that what I was hearing at the time, I think my metric for heavy, it wasn't even really heaviness, it was just the intensity.
Mhm.
So, that's why I kept like wanting more and more, oh, Slayer's crazy fast. Oh, Death is fast, or oh, Dark Angel really fast. Well, this band has, the first band I heard blast beats was the first Napalm Death record. I heard
Oh
them on the
yeah.
radio. I heard them on the, like, it was like a public radio station where I grew up in like 1988 or 89 or something like that. And I heard this and I was like, what is even happening? Because it was just, the blast, like more like bomb style blasts. And I just had
Yeah.
never heard anything that fast. And the vocals were crazy. And it was funny because it was literally like Napalm Death was played, and then stuff off the second Melvin's record,
Oh wow.
Off of Ozma. So what did I do? I went and ordered Ozma, and then I went to the record store, and at that point in time, I think Harmony Corruption was out, or maybe was out a little later than that, but that was like
Sounds about
89,
right.
90, maybe something
Yeah.
like that. So it was like in that era, I went and looked for those things and found them. So yeah, I mean, I have basically an odd small grocery store in East Central Illinois to thank for carrying those magazines, and then being lucky enough to be born near-ish a college town that had record stores that really thoughtful, good buyers
Hmm.
supplied with just really interesting music. So I mean, I was fortunate. Yeah, I could get these death metal whatever records there and stuff, but also you could get Butthole Surfers records. You can get all this sort of just really kind of outsider weird swans and stuff that's just like, as a
Oh yeah.
kid, what do you have any business listening to that stuff? What I mean? Or finding it. But it was like you'd go into these stores and you're playing it. Of course, you'd walk up to the counter with your whatever crap you bought, doing, Mr. Sir, what is this weird music playing? And the guy just barely looks at you. He's like, no, John Wayne, Texas Funeral. Okay. And then, file it away in your head. And then next week, maybe if you have money, go get it or something like that. So I don't know. I just was very fortunate to be in this sort of intersection of all this cultural stuff at the time, and just having this insatiable need to be either exposed to it or consume it in some way. And yeah, I don't know. It's now it's you can all find it online, and that's not
Yeah.
very fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat. Like when I was growing up, we we had a small grocery store near us, and it was the same thing. I would go in there, I would see like Hit Parader and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Beg my dad to buy them, and he
Hmm.
wanted nothing to do with it. He would
Oh
kind of
yeah.
look at the cover and be like, "What is this garbage?"
Hmm.
I was like, "Come on, it's my own money. Let me buy it." And
Yeah,
he
exactly.
would relent, and then next thing you know, my fucking walls are covered in Max Cavalera posters and shit, and just it just goes from there, like you were saying.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I remember one time I was staying at
I
my
miss that.
grandparents. Yeah, I was staying at my grandparents because my parents were out of town, and they had Hit Parader had a magazine, like a sort of an offshoot called Power Metal, and it wasn't power metal like we think of it now.
Hmm.
Like it was power metal, like, oh, this is heavier metal. So the cover had Slayer, King Diamond, Exodus, maybe, I don't remember who else, Death Angel, something like that. And it was
Yeah.
four little pictures of this lineup of bands in there, and I had it sitting on top of this pile of clothes, and my grandma kind of ambles in, and she just like looks at this picture of King Diamond, and she just like looks at me and goes, "What is this power metal?" It was just, everyone has that thing happen in their life. It was hilarious. So I just remember that, and then like my dad giving like a Twisted Sister, we're not going to take it sort of moment when he came up to my room, and I was supposed to be doing like algebra homework or something, and I was listening to whatever music I was listening to, and I had some poster on the wall, and I mean, I had a bunch, but I forget who he looked at, but he looked at the poster and then looked at me and goes, "Is this what you want to do with your life?"
Oh my goodness.
Unbeknownst to the Twisted Sister video or anything like that. And I was just like, I guess I better get back doing my homework, But apparently I was fortunate to get to do with my life. So great choices.
It's real funny, man. I've been working on this video for a while now, that I'm gonna put out where it's about like the PMRC and like
Hmm.
Dee Snider going to testify and all that kind of stuff and the satanic panic stuff that was happening in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy because like if you think about it, Dee Snider is kind of responsible for like sort of saving heavy metal, like the censorship aspect.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't testify, I can only imagine how like your guys' records would be censored even more, like Cannibal Corpse, list goes on and on. And if he didn't do that, like where would we be at now with all this
Yeah.
censorship?
I don't know. You think it's like where like the culture evolves and moves forward and gets maybe more progressive, quote unquote, or
Yeah,
tolerant, whatever
you would
you want
hope.
to say. Where does the intersection of that cultural like forward movement mixed with would it have taken him, or would it have evolved slower because that wasn't this little push to expose these people who were trying to condemn this artwork or the music and just to make fools of them? Because I'm
Yeah,
sure there were a lot of people who, after they saw that, they're kind of like, wow, this big hairy goon's kind of got a really good point. He's pretty articulate too.
right?
It's not some guy going up there. He actually sounds like he has a lot more of a sort of justified reasoning than these congressional members or whatever who are trying to ban it. At the same time, it's just like, it's not that that was the last gasp of that sort of thing, like moral majority, that heyday of that kind of thing, but it just kind of, you see a lot of the rest of the world probably looking at us like going, got to be kidding. They're having hearings over this stuff,
Right.
when it's just, it's basically audio horror movies,
Yeah.
horror movie. That was always the big argument, like these horror movies that depict very realistic killings or murder or torture or whatever. Oh, do you have those in the theaters? Yes, they're rated R or whatever, so it's restricted, but it's in the theater. But if you have a music, recording that, yeah, may have gross cover art or gory cover art, maybe intense song titles, but obviously no visual component aside from the cover art. Oh, we got to
Right.
ban this. We got to, take it off the shelves. I'm like, what? I mean, I understand a lot of these were independent artists or small label artists that didn't have the money to, you know, elbow their way in and not be kind of, I don't want to say censored or kind of held as accountable.
Yeah.
But I always thought that was weird. Like, it's just entertainment. It's just a movie. I
Right.
mean, people who love music, it's not just entertainment, of course, but at the same time, it's like if people are going to like detach themselves and look at it as just this product. Okay, you have a visual and audio product, and then just a purely audio product. Whatever. It's like, this is viable. This is okay. This is not. This is the worst thing ever. I don't know. I think it maybe even speaks to, um, regardless of the style or what people, how that it's just how people subconsciously know that music is that important to us as humans, whatever you like.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a little element of that, like, well, movies, yeah, this is entertainment. Music, that's a thing, even if it's just another product, basically. Sadly, or treated as such, I should say. So,
I I will say the ironic thing about that is the other thing that happened in the 80s is Britain did their thing where they banned a bunch of horror movies. They did the like video
mm-hmm,
nasties or whatever. So
mm-hmm,
they took the opposite way of us. Instead
yeah,
of banning music, they were like, no, let's not have horror movies. So like there was 130 titles or something like that, if I remember, that just couldn't be watched
couldn't
or
be,
owned.
yeah, huh?
And I was like, holy shit. Now it's like different. You
Yeah,
can
it's
own
okay.
it,
It's
but
anything goes pretty much. Well, and the
yeah.
stuff with like the Cannibal Corpse, the records in Germany that you couldn't Butcher to Birth, Tune Mutilated or whatever, and they couldn't
Yeah.
perform a few songs for years. I think like probably like 10, 15 years. They were barred from performing those here. And I'm just like, I don't know. So maybe my theory on other countries looking at us and laughing was not as accurate as I thought. I don't know. But it just seems like, at that point in time, especially, it was just kind of odd that we were tripping up on that.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a sign that the glory days were there and, that's all we have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like everything's in a good place now as far as music. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot more acceptance to metal, and it's way more diverse now. So hopefully we won't go back to that, but
Yeah.
you never know with
Yeah.
how America is right now.
Yeah. We don't know. It's we'll see. We'll see about a lot of
Um,
things.
yeah. So you mentioned you started playing guitar at 12.
Yeah.
Were you self-taught? Were you taking lessons? How did you kind of like progress from buying a guitar to like damn it all the time now?
Um, I, well, because I was so into like heavy metal and guitar music or whatever, I played saxophone pretty much fifth grade through
Oh,
all through high school too,
fuck yeah.
all junior high and high school. But once I hit seventh grade, I was just like, oh man, the guitar. I had one friend who had one already, and he was kind of like the same one that had the DRI screen bloody gore tape. Um, and I was just like, oh man, I'll play with him. Even I had no idea what I'm doing. But I just wanted a guitar, and my parents apparently had a horrible lapse of judgment, or just I don't know what happened to them. But there was at like one of the music stores that did the whole school band and orchestra instruments, and some guitars, that kind of thing. It was one of those stores, and they had a pack that was basically guitar, gig bag, small total comp, like tiny little 8-inch speaker combo amp, or not even probably that big. It was like $170 or maybe even less than that. And I was like going in and, kind of window shopping, only knowing the brands that I saw in like Guitar Player or Guitar World or something like that. So, I mean, that one looks good. That one's cool looking. That's my assessment of how good the guitar was. But it mattered not, because come Christmas morning, 1987, there was the brand was Saga, and it was basically what I learned later after doing research. It was kit guitars that like music stores could buy and then put together and kind of
Okay.
Frankenstein themselves or whatever. But it was a cherry red Saga Gladiators, single humbucker, 2 single coil, with the worst tremolo in the world. Well, not quite, but not great. Pointy headstock though, and this little Quantum Q8 amplifier
Super tiny.
with distortion was the red knob. Blue
Okay.
knobs, red knob. So I got that, the cable, and this little case, or this little gig bag or whatever. And I just made horrific racket for a while. My parents were like, well, if you're going to be doing this and you're an enthusiast, you got to take lessons. You got to do something. You're not just going to jump around in the mirror with this stupid thing. So, okay, point taken, whatever. So we went back to that same music store, and they had a guy who offered lessons there. And it being 1987, was a kind of like, he was in multiple bands, and they were kind of like hard rock kind of hair metal bands. So he had this kind of poofy hair, like purple BC Rich, and like some
Oh,
other
hell
stuff.
yeah.
So I was just like, oh, this guy. And he was super nice, and he was course, got a ripper player, doing all this 8-finger kind of stuff. And I'm just this 12-year-old kid going, goot. Oh, sorry. Goot, and he's up there ripping. So I took lessons from him for, I want to say, like 6 or 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was, my parents were very skeptical. Like, they wanted this just immediate, oh, you got to be playing songs. I don't care if it's Mary Had a Little Lamb. I want to hear full songs, I want to make sure we're getting our investment money back on, taking you into town to go to this guy, or the cost of the instrument, whatever. And he was just having me do what most people do, is like, here's the scale, here's some chords, here's a little guitar book, play this, play this, play this, learn it next week, come back. If you have any questions, let me know. We'll work on it. Okay. And, I was like, not taking the right road. I'm like, he was, trying to teach me. This is a, sort of a, I don't know what you'd say, like just a proper method, and, how you progress. And I was just like, I want to play Metallica songs,
Yeah.
And so
trying to run before you can walk.
Totally. I got the Master of Puppets, like the tab book. And so I'm sitting here trying to play along, and a few songs I could kind of clunk my way, like the first 10 seconds through or something. But then, like Master of Puppets, all what am I supposed to do? Of course, I couldn't do shit. So my parents were like, I don't know if he's getting the progress we want. Plus, this guy's, he sometimes, I think he parties a bit, if you know what I mean, young man, that kind of thing. So they took me away from him, and took me to this other guy who was a grad student at the university, but he was a total blues dude. So he was, sure, perfectly knowledgeable, but he was not down with the medals at all. So, you'd have your little lesson, and then like the last 5 minutes, you'd be like, okay, is there anything you want me to try to teach you, and you can just work on for fun, for yourself? So I brought in, like, I had these Metallica tapes, and I brought him in. I was like, oh, this one's Creeping Death. I played it for him, and I'm all rocking out. And he just was like, looks at me, and he just like turns it off, like maybe 20 seconds in. He goes, I wouldn't know what to tell you, like this is garbage. This music is garbage. I want you to know that. I'm like, okay. He goes, I just don't know how to play this. This just sounds like patterns of noise. And I'm like, that's pretty much all music, but okay. Yeah. He's just like, yeah, if you want to bring me something in, like one of your parents' songs that you just happen to like, I can probably teach you that. But this just sounds like la, 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 la. I'm like, okay, thanks. And then I kept getting more and more, like, less interested, which is, like I said, the wrong path. Yeah. But I was like, okay, I know this handful of bar chords. I can move it really fast. So I'm just going to, stop seeing him and just kind of learn on my own, which is a totally stupid thing to do. But I just kind of learned enough, and like started listening to records and trying to play along with them and stuff that was kind of what I thought was my skill level. So I just like, oh, this is all in bar chords and, whatever. So I would just play along and everything like that. And then I was at one of the record stores I'd mentioned earlier, and I saw like one of those flyers with all the tear off phone numbers on it. And it was like, wanted, guitar player for band. And it was just listing like, Venom, Slayer, older, that kind of stuff, old Judas Priest, blah, 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 old Iron Maiden, whatever. But also I listened to MDC and DRI and Spermbirds and RKL, like more like fastcore kind of bands, of the era. So I was just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to be in a band, because I'm totally prepared to, of course. So I called the guy, and he was kind of like, to hear this kid who was at the time, I think probably by then, like 14 or maybe almost 15, say, hey, I'm going to be a band with you. And so he must either been desperate enough or bored enough to go, oh, yeah, you should come into town. So I went into his place, and like, there was this guy who was, out of college, he was old. So he was like 24 or something. And I was 10 years younger than that, or a little bit. Yeah, super old man. And so he's like trying to teach me stuff. And I was kind of keeping up a little bit. And he was just kind of, oh, okay, well, here, I made this demo tape, some songs I wrote. If you have any questions, let me know, but just try to learn them. Okay. So I took it home and just played over and over to it, and came back, and a few weeks later, and he was like, damn, you actually kind of ripped through a few of those. And that's actually mostly right. Okay. All right, then. So here was this 15-year-old kid playing with a 24-year-old, quote, after college kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I was in that band for like, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. And after that, right as that band was winding down, like I moved to Chicago to go to college, and he was from Chicago originally, so he moved back home. So we did that for like a year, and then I started other projects with different people. So,
Oh wow.
uh, yeah, so it was just a lot of just kind of hearing things and trying to imitate them and doing it terribly, and then it's original because it's horribly inaccurate.
Far as your evolution as a guitar player, how do you keep up and maintain that stuff now? Like, do you have like a practice regimen that you follow, or you just kind of like
it,
practice,
it's
like,
become like, because of like, well, all my stuff is still in San Diego. Like, well, not all of it, but like 95% of it.
okay, wow, yeah,
On my rig for cattle stuff, that's all in San Diego. I live in Berlin now, so
okay,
I have my two guitars that I travel with all the time in this closet back over here. And then I basically have some pedals that I've acquired, and then everything else is just like through my interface into a computer, just trying to keep up like that. So um, right now we're actually cattle's in a sort of a writing cycle. So unless it's like songs that I have to relearn for tour, like a song we haven't played for 4 or 5 years that I really need to brush up on,
yeah,
it's pretty much just like writing, or just going through riffs and doing that stuff over and over. So as far as practice routines, like people would go like, oh, I spent an hour, with my, metronome or whatever going through stuff, and then after that I do this sort of stuff. I think uh, I set up my metronome when I really want to, like, I'm working on a riff and I want to make sure that everything's on. So I just,
yeah,
just do that. It's more of, it's like I said, it's as with before when I was younger, it's not probably the most advisable thing, but it's more of like a practicality thing where like, I've got to do this. I want to advance to this next level with this riff or this helping put this song together. So I got to get out, sit there and have my click going and just get it as close as I can, to perfect, So
yeah,
I think that is, it's not when I say this, I don't mean it because it's a chore, because it's absolutely not. But it's like, you practice out of the necessity for writing material, and then of course, there's stuff that I'm like may not ever go to anything, that I'm just kind of messing with, that I like sit there and just do over and over until I get as close as possible to what I think it should be. And then, maybe I'll forget it 2 weeks from now. Maybe I'll be like, I should really try to integrate that into a song and see if the guys are into it, So it's for that. I think it's just being fortunate enough to be able to be able to still have that enjoyment of playing, and be able to uh, have like sort of a practical element to it, to where this is for songs that we're writing, and not
yeah,
just, okay, I got to do this thing so I can keep this sort of level of dexterity. I think, what we do, there's enough variance in it that like you're always tickling certain techniques and stuff like that, So by just trying to stay fit and stay keeping up with your chops for the songs, and then for new material, I think that kind of, keeps me busy. And once again, I'm not saying that's something to endorse. I think everyone should probably, if they're a serious player, have their sort of routine. But my routine is just noodle, which is, like I said,
I mean,
just
hey,
sit there,
that's
kind of turn off the brain, and then like, what was that? And then, work it out.
yeah. I mean, it seems like that's what works for you. So, like, why would you have to worry about like
Yeah.
learning
I
to
mean,
do those other things that may not?
I see guys that are super disciplined, and I took like in the way where they're like, we spend an hour doing this, and then an hour
Yeah,
doing this, and then an hour doing this, 5, 6 days a week, or however many, maybe 7 days a week. I don't know. And I was just, man, I admire that so much, But like I said, and once again, these probably bad habits start as a young person, but it's always just like, I want to write that song, I want this thing, so I'm going to work towards that thing. Where it's like the wholeness of the song, writing either mostly by myself in the past, or like with, collaborating like I do now with the guys and everything. Um, that's the goal, So I guess that kind of says there's that whole, what type of player are you? Are you a song type of player, or are you a technique player, or whatever? I think with this type of music, you have to be a little bit of both.
yeah,
Uh, but yeah, I was always like very much drawn to the sort of the song and the overall feeling for the song. Yeah, this is a ripping solo. That's cool as hell. That how did you do that? But there's very few solos that you can kind of hum later, or you're maybe rattling around in your head. But songs and hooks from the songs, that's what you remember, or the atmosphere, the feeling you get from the song, for me
That's
at least.
true. Yeah, no, that I agree with that too. Because a lot of times, like, this isn't really a complaint, but I've noticed a lot of bands that have utilized solos, like they're kind of
Mhm.
forgettable. It's not like a Crazy Train or something like that, where like you
But
just
yeah, there's
know that whole
iconic
thing in your
ones.
head.
Yeah, there's iconic ones that I'm like, oh, I can hum every bit of that. That's genius writing. I love that solo or whatever. But it's like it went like the pendulum swing because for like say certain types like brutal death metal in the early 2000s, it was literally just like 50 riffs, no solos, just like
Yeah.
typewriter crazy. Um, and and then it kind of swang back, and there was that sort of necrophagist sort of reintroduced the whole, oh, here's virtuosity in death metal again.
Yeah.
So then people are like, oh, we can incorporate the element and just be just as brutal. So it's, I don't know, it goes back and forth. I like with our music, it's like sometimes there not just need one. Sometimes there is one in a song, sometimes there's not, because there's enough, I think, like interesting stuff going on that it's not going to add anything to the song if you have that.
Right.
Other parts, it's like because of the way the song's structured, it's almost like, oh, this is a little more not, I don't see traditional structure, but like about 2/3 of the way through the song, it's like, oh, this is perfect there. It just keeps the energy going, boom, 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 and then you have this conclusion at the end. So I don't know. I think in the
Instead of just
past, like,
jamming a solo right in the middle or
yeah,
at the
yeah,
end.
for this, like just for the fake that it has, you don't need necessarily need one. Sometimes
Yeah.
it elevates the song, and I'm all for it. Um, I was thinking, other types of other subgenres of metal or whatever that it became like you have to have one or this you're not this viable thing. It's just like, oh, maybe, but what if it doesn't need one? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then
Yeah.
a lot of, there were influences from other types of music where there's more of a textural thing going on to where like it's not
Oh,
necessarily a
yeah.
guitar solo proper where there's noodling or just single note stuff, but just like, oh, it's just almost like there's a keyboard adding layers in here that just drives the emotion and like the power of the song. So that almost serves as, a solo hopefully would, as far as adding that type of, sort of crescendo to the music.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I have a friend who's like all about guitar solos. So anytime
Mm-hmm.
there's a good one, he's just like sends guitar solo, and I'm like, yeah, it's cool, man. And like, I agree, they're great solos.
All right.
But I often wonder like how much bands worry about using them as like we need it, or is just like a songwriting tool. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing this because we can, or we're doing it because we have to for the song. That little bit of like
Yeah.
give and take there with it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if they're done well, nothing but respect. Like there's some stuff
Yeah,
like certain ones I'm just like, oh my God, this is incredible.
yeah,
Uh, but at other times, like it's like you'll hear it and like, oh, I guess that has to be there. We're already at this point in the song, and I guess that's where that goes. So I don't know. It's like with everything, it's
depends on the band and what they're
depends
doing.
on the
Yeah.
context. Sometimes it's the best decision they could make. Other times it's like, well, that's pointless. But yeah.
So are you a big gear guy? Like do you like seek out certain things in guitars or like pedals or sounds or things like that?
I well, for years and years, I was pretty much guitar amp. Maybe like
Hmm.
one pedal, like very simple, almost like utility stuff, not like effects. I had maybe delay in the loop for leads or whatever, or layering and stuff.
Yeah.
But only in the past, I'd say since maybe I don't know, like Mount Death Atlas time.
Okay.
Right before that, I started getting a lot more into pedals. Um, I'm not a pedal person, but I think like I have songwriting ideas that the only way I'll be able to convey it is like, oh, this atmospheric pedal is definitely kind of puts those things together. So fortunately, it's like the way it is now. Like there's two guitar players, so I don't have to try to cover 50 different things as the only guitar player.
Yeah.
And like that in the past, maybe I shied away, or we kind of made the decision as a group to shy away from me doing certain things because it's like, well, live, how are you supposed to do that? You don't want to have this big gaping hole where there was a guitar kind of chugging along, where
Right.
it's just like it just kind of fills sort of space. But so I started getting a little more into pedals, but I don't know. I've always been, probably since the advent of, I think having the internet at work in the late '90s, uh, I was like, oh, look at these. These are message boards. What's that? Okay, and oh, it's guitar related message boards. Okay. Oh, and there's like a section for amps, and oh my god, you know. So because that was the wild west of your workplace regulating internet usage, as long as you got your job done, you're just like sitting here all day doing all that stuff. So I was looking at, like, back then there was a site called guitar.com, which was just, I don't want to say it was a precursor to Harmony Central. I don't think it had anything to do with it, but it was that same sort of crowd, I guess you could say, if you remember, if you ever did old harmonycentral.com stuff back, geez, years ago by now.
Does sound familiar, but I'm not entirely sure that
Yeah,
I would have,
it was kind of like hot property, God, by now, it was like 15 years ago or something like that.
okay.
But I think Guitar Center, like, I want to say Guitar Center acquired like the usage of it, and then it kind of fell off. I don't remember. But
Bummer.
these boards and the old PRS forum back in the day, Birds and Moons or whatever it's called, you know, they were talking about all the amps and these guitars I'd like never heard of. So I just had this sort of like, oh, here's all this dentist or this lawyer uploading all these pictures of these expensive guitars he has, and just looking at this. Wow, what in the heck is this? I had never heard of that type of wood and everything. And I was still in Chicago at the time, and there was a store called Making Music that it still exists, kind of a, not what it once was, but back then it was like, you know, it was Guitar Center was where everyone went, or their local, you know, guitar place.
Yep.
And this Making Music store, I went in there and I'm like, I'd never heard of these brands. Okay, yeah, there's the nice custom shop Fender, Gibson, whatever over here, and there's PRS or whatever. But then what is this? Brian Moore, what is that? Michael Spalt, Lakeland bass. What is this? Okay, and these amps. Bogner, okay, Soldano, Gytron. So I was like, what is this stuff? But the cool thing was, is they would let you play anything. I mean, they weren't like, you know, I mean, yeah, there's some stuff that stays in the back, you know, you got to make an appointment to look at it or whatever. But it was pretty much this kid, me, would come in and be like, oh, pick a guitar off the wall and like go into these isolation rooms and just play these amps and just be like, oh my God, this is a whole different world. You know, it wasn't sitting on the floor at Guitar Center with like a Digitech preamp or like a Crate Blue Voodoo or whatever. It was like, oh my God, you know, this is like, they're so powerful and they're just so, this sounds like a recording and I'm playing through it. It's amazing. And so, yeah, I was at the time, like I had this, my big amp that I used for band was this Laney AOR 50. I wish I'd have kept that amp. One of those things where I had it and it broke, which means I hadn't changed the tubes ever. So of course it was broken. So I figured I'd take it apart because of course I can fix it. And I know what I'm doing, of course. So I took it apart. Nope, I have no idea what's going on here. So I left it in our alley and someone took it in the alley.
Damn, man.
But yeah, so I was looking for a new amp, which is why I was at Making Music. That's when it kind of comes up. But either way, so I go there and I'm like, play through like a Wagner Ecstasy 101B and Soldano. I think an SLO, but I think it was funny. They had one, it was a Reverbasonic, which is not normally one of their, you know, heavier, more aggressive amps, but it was modified and customized for Lou Reed.
Oh, wow.
And for some reason it ended up at Making Music in Chicago. Okay. And he apparently had it modded for like more gain plus this reverb, you know, the reverb function on it. And I remember sitting there going like, this is like the best amp I've ever heard. Like, this is incredible. And this Ecstasy too was amazing. And so I asked the guy there, was like, probably afraid to ask this, how much is this amp? And the Ecstasy at the time was like $3,500. And I was like, oh, that's like,
Yikes.
that's half of what I make in a year at that point. I'm like, no, I don't have any kidneys to sell. So I guess that's going to be some other time in life, you know, kind of thing, maybe. And then the same thing with like the Reverbasonic. It wasn't as expensive. It was like $2,750 or whatever. But still, I'm like, there's no way I can afford that.
Yep.
So what I ended up, and I hate to sound like I'm settling, but what I ended up settling on that I could actually kind of afford was or rectifiers were new at the point, or not. They weren't new. Those came out like 93, 94. But this was like 97, 98. So they were a few years old.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing I could afford. And I sold like some stuff, and I like, you know, I think borrowed like a couple $100 from my parents or something like that, whatever. And it was $1,522. And I was like, this is the most expensive thing I've ever owned. Oh my God, you know, that kind of deal. So yeah, I still have it. It's a 2-channel triple from 1997, ordered in 97. So I think it's like I don't know where they get the revisions. People get all like fidgety and super particular. I think it's a G or an F. I'm not sure. I'm not that much of an enthusiast of those to really know what time period dictated that. But so yeah, I used that amp for a few years. And that was my first nice amp, you know. And then after I moved to San Diego, I never stopped looking at forums and stopped obsessing about gear. And so then, for whatever reason, I just joined Cattle, and I was like, oh, I got a good new amp, of course, you know, whatever. So, you know, or a metal blade. Oh shit, I gotta get serious here and get some real stuff. Right. So even though everyone used rectifiers, still do, you know, it's not like whatever, like I needed to graduate beyond that. But either way, so I went and I started, you know, working like, you know, this is when you could still work overtime, you know, the dates, this sort of thing. So overtime, and then I was working at the law firm then, so I started doing side work for this other attorney on the weekends and at nights. So I was just like, well, I'm just going to work and save up for this thing or some stuff. And I knew I wanted to go big. So I'm the only guitar player. I like covered all this stuff. I got to have all this crap. So I like, I went up to LA it was Amp Shop in Sherman Oaks, and bought one of the first Uber shawls that was out. Like it was literally after NAMM 2002. This was in like March or April. So they just had started actually making them seriously.
Oh, wow.
And the one that he had to sell me was a NAMM model which is whatever, you know, if it's just a production one, oh, here's our NAMM one, who cares? But when you open it up, there's still a bunch of stuff like where you could tell they hadn't completely like perfected like how their circuit boards were going to be. It was like, here's one circuit board, this part's hand wired, this is this, and it was totally like, this is one of the ones that they use as a prototype. So
that's kind of sick though.
It is, yeah, and it's one of the original. You know, I know they have like the circuit or the serial number on the back. I really need to check on. Well, their website isn't the best, but I need to check it in some way to find out, you know, how many of the first few it was, you know. But yeah, I used that amp for up until like I think 2014 or so. So again, no wait, was it? Yeah, a good 13, 14 years. You know, I had used that. Yeah, so that was like, I used that, and then I bought the other amp I bought was an Ingo Fireball, and that was like relatively, and it was a 60 watts, so it was like relatively inexpensive compared to the Bogner. And then I got 2 Bogner Uber cabs. So I had these 2 heads that I got this flight case made of, had 2 heads and the 4 rack spaces, and then these 2 cabs. So it was just this fucking super rig that I was just like, oh, and everything. So I was super happy about that. And, you know, and then I don't know, fast forward how many years now, and the Engel I sold to my friend, and then the Bogner actually, because I live over here now, and I kept that amp. I'm letting him use some of my stuff in his recording studio. So I was like, here, you can use it as much as you want. Just kind of, here's my free storage, but at the same time, do whatever you want with it. Just don't take it out and play it live with a band, but you can use it all day, every day in your studio. So we've had a really good arrangement doing that. He's gotten a lot of use out of that, and a couple other amps I let him use. Yeah. So he's down in San Diego, but it's basically El Cajon, La Mesa area, which is East County, just very western East County, San Diego. But yeah, he has that. I have a Soldano Avenger. He's using that. And then I have for a few years, I used a Baron DHG, and he's got that. That's a really cool, very not kind of an under the radar amp that this fellow from Wichita, Kansas produced for like maybe 5 or 6 years.
Really?
Yeah, it's a.
How'd you come up around that one?
Well, that was one of those that like my, this era of like listening to like sound samples online,
Yeah.
of just this guy playing them in his house. It's like, oh, he's doing some clips, and his tone was incredible, and the prices were really reasonable for a completely handmade amp. Like just him doing everything, like cutting the box out, covering the head shell with the Tolex. Had these like little labels, kind of like someone hires someone to print those out, and then gluing them to the front or like taping certain parts, and then the inside is immaculate, and everything very well made.
Man.
Yeah, and my friend Ryan, who had a period, I think, when he was married, but before his first kid was born, so he still had some money, at least for that type of thing. He had kind of a guitar and amp room, and he had a couple of these Barons, and he was like, "You should come up, and I know you've been talking about hearing them online. I got a couple of them. They're great. You should come up and check it out at my house." And so I was just playing around with them in his house, and they were just like, these things are phenomenal. So I ordered one from Dave Woodhouse, which is that's the guy who made them in Wichita, and it came exactly the time period he said it would, and was made meticulously well. So I mean, Anthropocene Extinction is recorded with that amp, or with that amp. Yeah. So yeah, prior to that, like the Bogner Ingle combo were Humanure to Monolith.
Okay.
Anthro is the Baron, and then the past two have been the High Watt. So
that's interesting, because now when I go listen to those, I'm mind and see if I can like
it's
notice little differences.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I probably could have, when I say fixed it, I mean just asked him to like give me like a change this value out of certain parts of the amp, and I could have probably either done it myself or had a friend do it. But my issue with the Baron was it sounded great. Like it's one of those, it's like just sounds great by yourself, and the tone is incredible. But once you get another like guitar player in there, it's like it's so refined that it kind of like gets buried sometimes. So it was like so smooth, and so just like easy to play that it's almost like all the ugly stuff on other amps, that's what makes it cut. So it's like almost sounded too good, if that's such a thing. So it, like in the studio, fantastic, and just sitting there playing, it's just like, oh my god, this thing's incredible. But it just got a little buried, unfortunately. And I remember, this is where come up to current day as far as amps go. My buddy Dan, this was in I think NAMM 2018, 17, 18, I don't know. But yeah, because it had been January that year. NAMM 2018, and I wasn't really feeling it that year, and I was like, I guess I'll go up on Sunday, and that's the slowest day, and it's just kind of like I just get in, check out some stuff, or not, make fun of people I don't know, and leave. And so I got there, and my buddy Dan's like, dude, you got to come over to High Watt and check this amp out. I was just like, I saw a clip online. It sounded okay, but I'm just being lazy and grumpy, and I don't want to go over there. Right. So there was only one amp that I really wanted to check out there. And like I said, at the time, I was happy with the Baron. So I was like, I'm not really looking to buy anything, and I don't want to spend money anyway. So I went over and checked out KSR first, because I met Kyle a few times. He was super cool, and his amp sounded really good. And he had a new amp called the Juno, and I tried that. It sounded great, played great, felt great, even at low volume on the NAMM floor. I was like, oh, this is cool. I mean, I really don't want to buy another amp, but man, this one makes me want to buy it. And then once again, text my buddy Dan, you got to come over here. You got to come over here. So I kind of at the time begrudgingly went over to High Watt, and inside the booth was what's his name? Ben Eller.
Oh yeah.
And then Jason Frankhauser was in there, and Yokosko, Swedish fellow. So these like total like kind of super talented, online guitar instructors were in there, and of course I'm just super intimidated. So it's these three guys, myself, Dan, and one of the High Watt reps. And we're in there, and they have this amp, and it's this prototype for the Super High 50, which is the one I play now. And through these, they'd have this little enclosure built for the NAMM floor, so you could be loud inside this room. And so I was just standing outside, and I'm like, man, that actually sounds really, really good. And of course, you don't identify High Watt with high gain. It's more like clean, tons of headroom, clean to a very loud volume. And when it does break up, it's super like, it's just more like classic rock to hard rock, early hard rock sound. The Pete Townsend from like Live at Leeds, that sort of thing, just kind of a crunchy sort of thing. And I was hearing this, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, nothing that we do, or whatever. Not even maybe barely scraping into classic heavy metal, but so they're like, oh, hey guys, come on in, check it out, just hang out a bit, because the people that were in there left or whatever. And so we sit down, and I hear all these guys playing it. I'm like, oh man, wow, this is kind of unreal, And they're like, oh, you want to play? I'm like, no, I'm going to make a fool of myself. You guys are really good players, blah, blah, blah. And then finally at the end, they're like, you sure you don't want to play? I'm like, all right. So Jason hands me his, he had like a Les Paul with, I think it was like a bare knuckle painkiller in it, I want to say, something like that. And then I just sat by the amp and just kind of fiddled with it a bit, and then was like just hitting stuff. And I'm like, this is kind of like combination of what I want every amp to sound for this type of music. What I want every amp to sound like. This is insane. And then, it got like, I stood back, and like the rep or the guy from Highwatt at the time was just sitting there, just kind of sweeping through like the sort of settings, and like everything sounded good. And the low end was just like punishing and like really like not like a blanket, but just really just like a bat, just super, like punchy. And I was like, this is God. I just kept saying like, damn it. Why did I come in here and play this thing? And that's what two of the other guys like Ben Eller and whatever were just like, dude, I'm so mad that I came in here and play this because I want this amp so bad now. Yeah. And so had that experience, and then I took the business card or got the contact information of the Highwatt rep, and I was just like, well, I'm going to see, I'm in this band, this whole kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I kept in contact with them, and I kind of tried to work that little greasy magic, and that didn't work, but I learned later, not why, but like kind of Highwatt's policy. But so he said, well, I can put you on the list for one. We probably won't get it made until maybe September, October. And this was back in January. I'm like, okay. By then, I'll start scraping together money. What's it going to go for retail? And he told me like, okay. And so, I was, saving money, whatever. And then, I bought it, and they had it shipped to my door in San Diego from UK. And so I was actually, I think I want to say we were on tour. We were out of town at the time doing band stuff. And it's like, this came for you, that kind of thing. Sitting in front of the door, like, take it inside, yeah. And so, yeah, I got that. And then after I'd, like the check cleared basically, and prior, obviously, got that and everything. And then like maybe a couple months later, or a few months later, the guy, my friend Rob, who was formerly at Highwatt, he's no longer with them, but he said like, oh, we were wondering if we'd like to bring you on to the roster. And I'm like, hell yeah. So, and what they offer is very like incredibly good support. So if you're touring or whatever, and you need you're obviously like, we're in European territory where, my amp, I said, it's North America. It doesn't, it stays back there. So like, say for this tour we have coming up, and then the ones we've done in the past, it's like, okay, what's your first date, or where can we ship this to you? And so you just get ahead. And your only thing is you have to figure out transit, returning. They will send it to you, but once you're done with the tour, it's got to go back, obviously. So you got to figure out how that's going to get back. But other than that, it's not like you have to pay it around or anything like that. So that's kind of like worth a lot to me, is to be able to have that confidence and be able to have that, available to me. And it's a great head. It's fantastic.
Yeah,
it's not barely any bells and whistles on it, but it just like is just angry and loud, and has a very distinct, unique kind of, the gain structure is a lot different. It doesn't sound like a lot of more modern amps that are just, to me, like too dense and crackly. It's like, this has got like low ends, like true low end, not like a big woolly lower mid, but just like a really slappy, punchy low to it, but a nice like kind of Kerrangy, big, mid, heavy, thick thing. It just sounds awesome. I love it, So that's all. That's where I'm at for amps. For guitars, and I would be very, kind of remiss if I didn't go into this whole thing, of course.
Oh yes,
but
That's what I want.
Y-
Give me the
Yeah,
guitarist.
the I had, like I said, I went through not a bunch, but went through way more amps than guitars. I've been much more of an amp person than guitar person, but um, for years and years, like for the early, probably the entirety of the time, I joined Cattle in 2001 up until I want to say 2004, 2005. I used a Brian Moore C55, which
Okay.
is a company that hasn't existed for like 15 years now, at least. Originally, it was a custom shop out of upstate New York that only had like 5 models. And then they did the thing like, oh man, we got to do some offshore stuff because, you know, got to actually sell some guitars. Not a lot of people, the price of entry basically for the custom shop stuff was not cheap.
Yeah.
So they started overseas stuff. And I never really actually played one of those overseas guitars, but either way, it didn't really work for them. And they went out of business. But that Brian Moore guitar is, I still have it. It's in San Diego too, but it's a great, great guitar. But I went with that, and then mid 2000s, there was a local guy in San Diego who had a basically a repair mod guitar shop, and he made his own guitars, and they were really pretty reasonably priced. A lot of them were basically like depending what you wanted, he would basically make a parts guitar for you, and then do a lot of customizations on the body or whatever pickups hardware you wanted. And so I basically had, I think, 2 or 3 of those. One of them I sold, the other 2 I still have.
Mm-hmm.
But one was like almost like a Jackson soloist style, but with a custom headstock. A couple DiMarzios in it, a Wilkinson bridge, flat neck. Then I had another one with like a compound neck that was a little more almost PRS shaped with another kind of custom headstock on it, Wilkinson bridge, DiMarzio pickups. And I used those for years up until 2011, when I got my first Cardinal, and I met Sam, the maker of Cardinal, in Austin at an amp show. I was with my buddy Adam, Satellite Amplifiers. He was exhibiting at the show, and I went with him. And we're just sitting there in our. It was one of those amp shows where they rent out a hotel, and you can be as loud as you want between these hours, instead of like NAMM where you have like a cap on your volume and stuff. This is like, if you want to be on 10 all day, everyone's going to hate you around you, but there's nothing that says you can't be, so it's the perfect place to show off, amplifiers. So we were there exhibiting, and this fellow walks in holding this Zenith model that he has that I use a different model, but he had one of those. And we're kind of like, oh, this is kind of an interesting looking guitar. And he introduced himself, sat down. He's like, hey, if you plug these into any of your amps, if you want to try them. And so myself and my friend, we were just kind of passing it back and forth and playing it. And we're like, I have no idea what to make of this guitar, but this is really, I am just intrigued. This is intrigue, And the guy that was, the builder was super interesting and, fun guy. So we, took his contact info, and he showed himself out, and that's it, And I think I shot him an email a few weeks later. It was like, oh, hey, great meeting you. Thanks for stopping by. Best to you, whatever. And he responded. He's like, oh, it was great meeting you guys. And hey, if you guys, either one of you ever want to have a custom build, I'll totally, I'm not going to give it to you, but I'll hook you up a bit on it. We're like, oh, okay. And I don't know why. I just kind of, it was that planted the seed. And I just went on his website and just kind of, looked at the same 4 pictures over and over, contacted him, and yeah, we went through it. And like, I think 6 days, months later, I got a guitar from him. And that's wow. the Cardinal Spalta Pecan that there's a little bit of a monolith and some of it on Anthro. And I used it live off and on, but it's one of those that I didn't want to take on the road too much because it's super purdy, and it's not that it's super delicate, but I was just like, my original idea when I contacted Sam again was, I was like, hey, I love that guitar, but it kind of scares me to take it on the road. Is there anything? I know you're a custom builder, so it's kind of a loss to ask, but can you kind of hook me up with like a utilitarian cheapie, basically? And he's like, oh, I'll do it for price that's, going to probably make you really happy, but it's going to be basically parts of unfinished stuff from other guitars he goes, of course, I'll make the neck how you want it, and
That's
I'll
kind of
put the
cool.
pickups in. I'll put the pickups in it you want it, and I'll put the bridge in you want it. But like the body, I might have to do this and that. And I'm like, dude, whatever, it's fine. That guitar's been on everything we've ever done. It's like the best sounding guitar, and it's the copper top that everyone, that if people think of like, why does he put? What does he put? What's that weird guitar he plays? It's that one,
Yeah. Okay.
And it's funny when we take it in the studio. Like I don't know how many times I've had that one and the other Cardinal next to each other, and just A B, and we do it every time. And Dave Otero, he goes, man, that pecan one sounds great, but there's something about this copper top one that just sounds so good, and I can't figure out. They're same pickups, same scale, same everything, different woods, but same. And he's just like, that one just sounds better. I don't know how to describe it. So that's been on everything since 2013.
That's crazy.
So all the like on Anthro, that's all that guitar. Death Atlas, it's all that guitar. And like I said, Anthro has a little bit of the other Cardinal. There's a couple things on there with that, like layering and stuff. And then Terracite's all that guitar too.
Monolith as well, you said?
No, Monolith is the one of my the guy from San Diego. His brand is called
okay.
Naked.
Cool,
yeah,
cool.
well, that's Monolith has that, and then there is, I think, a few leads I did with the Cardinal, the original Cardinal on that one. But that's all rhythm, and that's all the Naked, and then from Anthro on, it's everything's Cardinal in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, and I mean, even actually just before I got on the phone with you, I was texting back and forth with him. There's a couple new projects in the works. One's actually getting a lot closer to seeing, its life. So we're kind of going over, like he has catted out, sort of, here's what the headstock's going to look like. Here's this and that. So one of them is more, the one that I'm just speaking of right now is something that will possibly a model that he'll introduce, because it seems like it could be a Cardinal, whereas the other one is, just going to venture to guess it probably will not be a model he'll introduce. It'll just be a custom guitar, because it is very much not a Cardinal looking guitar. Yeah, I'm anxious to get those off the ground. The other one, the one is probably, I mean, here we are, it's like mid-December, but I'd say maybe in the next few months we'll see that one.
Sick.
Or maybe in the spring sometime. And the other one, who the heck knows?
Yeah.
It's one guy working in his converted garage, and he doesn't have anyone helping him, and like half his wood and tools are in Houston where his parents live, and so he's got to drive back and forth between Austin and Houston. And his parents are elderly, so he's just like, half of it's like, hey mom and dad, that kind of thing, and all that. So, but yeah, some of the bigger equipment's there, and then his stuff at his house. So it's not just literally crank it out. Why isn't it ready? There's a lot going into it. And plus,
truly handmade.
Exactly. And when it's like we finally kind of decide on it, and it's like becomes quote commissioned or whatever, you're in line. Unless there's someone's being shot at or they're on fire, you're in line with everyone else. So his thing, and I totally respect it, is it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter unless you dump absurd amounts of money on me, you're in line with everyone else. I don't bump people. So because there's that much time involved in every project. Oh, you're number 5? Cool. Well, number 5 could equal a year and a half. You know what I mean? It's not, is what it is.
It's gotta be good quality though. I mean, just taking the time like that as well.
Oh, he's meticulous. And if it's something like, if he gets like 85% of there and it's not working, or there's something he just can't figure, is whatever, then start again. I mean, design will stay the same. It's just, but start again with the actual wood and everything. So, wow. I'd much rather have that and have a, kind of just a good, social, personal relationship with the builder,
right.
than just kind of have them stamped out like widgets or whatever. And, I mean, the convenience of that is really cool. And like, hey man, I got 3 new guitars this year. Sick, and who wouldn't love that, or who doesn't love that? But I don't know. I think it's the sort of the kind of it's going to sound stupid, the edging of seeing it like, oh man, uh, working on the neck now. Okay, can I see some pictures? That
Teaser
kind of thing.
shots. I got
Exactly,
it.
exactly. So I think that's really, I love that element to it too. And I mean, I have two of those guitars already. So it's not like I'm sitting here like really can't really do anything. I don't have a guitar. I mean, I'm fine. It's just at this point, it's more of like a something you love and enjoy, and you're enthusiast for it. So that's it. Not oh my god, I have to have this now. Otherwise, if that was the case, I would not be. It wouldn't be a thing. So.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's wild to me watching some of these like guitar YouTubers that have like walls of guitars and shit, and I'm
mhm.
like, how do you even play all of them? Or you played them once in this one video and then they just hang on the wall forever.
Yeah, I mean, if
You
someone's like
know, like
a big endorsee, or whatever, that's like, yeah, they send them a few guitars, and then they say, oh, for every three that we send you, keep one of them or something like that, and send the other two back or whatever. If they're doing like play testing or reviewing or whatever, I see, yeah, like you're saying in the background of some of these guys' vids, it's like, and I know it's not like a matter of like, well, he's a programmer, he's got the money, he's just into guitars. No, I mean, it's like, no, this guy's in a touring band,
right.
and hates. I don't know what you make, but I don't think you can afford all this shit. And it's like, if, unless you're at a certain level, you're in a touring band, it's like, you're not affording all that crap.
Yeah.
Then, it depends on your personal situation. Are you married, you have kids, you have whatever your thing in your life, then that becomes even less of an ability to have that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I'm always amazed at that. I'm like,
Yeah, me
I
too,
don't
man.
know. I'm just plunking away on the ones I've had forever. I mean, yeah, I just talked about the new ones I have coming, but I mean, you know, I've been playing that Cardinal as my main guitar for now since it's 2013, so 12 years almost. So I'm sure there's other dudes that have gone through like 15 guitars since then.
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
I
yeah.
just scrounged up enough to buy like a new kind of cheap guitar, and it's like the sad in like 4 years, you know?
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
I like
And when I
I
think
like it.
about it, yeah, somebody's like, oh, it's time for a new guitar. It's been a few months. I'm like, I haven't had a new guitar in like 12 years. Why? I'm like, oh, well,
Yeah.
it's, I don't know, just kind of like happy with what I have. And, I mean, I like how everything sounds. So why
Yeah.
change it up? I mean, there is that sort of little voice like, oh, something new or whatever, but I don't know. I think it's like I find my people and my, the builders or products that I like, and just kind of be loyal and wait on them,
Yeah. I like that. I appreciate that. That's it's a good way to like go about life and stuff, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, because I've
Genuine.
never, yeah, I've been fortunate not like with Cardinal, it's not like I mean, I have only two guitars at this point from him, but it's like I've never been disappointed by anything. It's always like exceeded my expectations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I get it, amps, of course, you go kind of, you're hopefully can go and try. So that's more of like, oh man, this thing sounds incredible. I really need it, or whatever. Guitars is like, this kind of crap. I mean, he knows me, he knows how I play, and he knows what my preferences are. You have confidence in him, but you're still kind of like, oh shit. And then it's always been great. So I have no doubt that it's going to continue to be that way. So.
So I was gonna segue into this earlier, but we got away from it, but
Oh yeah.
we'll jump into it. The main
Mhm,
reason,
sure.
not the main reason, but Humanure is
Hmm.
a 20-year anniversary, which
Yeah,
is insane. Uh
that's crazy, but yes.
I would love to know about that record, the story behind it, when you guys started writing it. Um, yeah, because it was only like what 2 years after To Serve Man,
Serbian was
when you
2002. Humanure
yeah
came out in 2004. Yeah.
okay
Well, after the Serbian, man, it's funny to think back in those times we could have a new record every couple of years. Now we're just like,
right.
ugh,
I was looking at that. I was like, man, 2 years,
right
2 years, two
again.
years,
Ugh.
4 years, 5 years. You know,
Yeah, the pandemic helped with some of that, but still, it was like
sure.
it was just, I don't know what it is or what it was, because we were touring all the time then too. Like
Okay,
we would
yeah,
like tour, and then all right, get back, sleep for a week, and then start writing again or whatever. And like now it's like everyone's lives are happening, and we're spread out over two continents and three different countries and all this stuff. Um, so at the time, we'd finished Man's. We didn't really have much of a touring cycle for that. We played a bunch up and down the West Coast. We did one tour in October 2002 with Guar.
hmm
being the first band on the War tour, which is 25 minutes of abuse from the audience. And then 2003, we went out with Deicide, Christian and Hate Eternal. That was our first like death metal tour. Did that, and then I think we had maybe something in the spring of 2004, but we started writing for basically. I'm sorry, I screwed up. I'm going to skip the whole thing.
Oh, good.
2003, yeah. 2003, Dave Astor, we parted ways with him, and he'd been in the band from the beginning. He was the drummer from the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it just at that time, just we were kind of leading different. He had different things going on in his life, and we were wanting to just be like, we're a full functioning touring band. We want to be out there as much as possible. And he just at that point in his life just he had started a new family at that point. He just had a child and everything, and that he couldn't be gone 8 months out of the year. Which who wants to be gone 8 months out of the year? Ugh. Either way, we were actually a couple of cycles. We were gone almost that much a year. It was insane.
I believe it, especially back in that era.
2005, 2006. We were on the road constantly. 2004 through 2006, we were. I don't know how we didn't kill ourselves, but
Yeah.
So. We parted ways with him, and then Mike Laughlin started playing drums for us. And Humanure was his first record with us. So we started, I want to say May of 2003, started writing Humanure. Pardon me. Started writing Humanure. So it was just myself, Troy, our old bass player, and Mike writing that record, the music at least. And we somehow hammered out, 10, 11 songs, maybe 12, I don't know. And they were all written in a garage, a soundproof garage behind the house, the house that Travis was living in.
Oh, wow.
So it was one of those houses where there's like 3 or 4 dudes, 3 or 4. There's always one person kind of sleeping on a couch, that kind of thing, sort of place. And in the back was just this building that had been soundproofed and had been a place for, I don't know how many tenants that had lived there. There'd always been people that were in bands or kind of younger folks. And there was always bands practicing there. There was even gear that was sitting there from like bands that hadn't practiced there for like 5 or 10 years that just like, there's a couple drum stands and this amp that no one uses. And so it was just like this little, okay.
Wow.
kind of place. So us and like, I think 2 other bands practiced back there. And we just would get together like 3 or 4 times a week and just, you got a riff, and then just kind of hammer it out, and somehow we wrote a record, and, we'd make these god awful recordings of, like a boom box in the center of the room. And then Travis would have to try to write vocals over that.
So that's how you guys demoed things?
Oh yeah, we did it that way up into an appallingly recent amount of time ago. Wow. Appallingly recent. These other guys, like these 12-year-olds have full studios in their houses, and we're sitting here like, oh, does that boombox work anymore that you got? And funny, anytime we try to use like, individual miking of everything, we're mic all the drums, two mics on each cab, all this stuff, sound like crap. The best ones, freaking boombox. So we're like, do the boombox, We don't do that anymore. We actually have a mixer and a bunch of crap in the room, but still. Yeah. It still sounds terrible. But actually the last one didn't sound too bad. But so we just had these horrible demos that we're giving Travis, and he would, write lyrics and do pattern, figure out patterns over it. Yeah. When it came time to record, our budget wasn't the greatest. I mean, our first record with Metal Blade, the one Sir Man, was done for like $7,500 or something.
Oh wow!
And for now, I mean, since everyone can do stuff at their homes if they want and make it sound pretty good, that's like, it's kind of expensive. It's like back in the day, going in a full studio, that's not a lot of money. So I think Humanure was maybe a few thousand more than that. Okay. So I don't remember exactly, but so we got Brian Slagle or Mike Faley from Metal Blade somehow convinced Bill Matoyer, who'd done Haunting the Chapel, Hell Awaits, a bunch of Armored Saint, you know, a bunch of classic Wasp, a bunch of classic metal records, like
Yeah.
legit classic metal records, to agree to do ours. So we were just like, oh, you know,
Perfect.
yeah, it was great.
Second
So
time doing a record, and we get to work with this guy.
with this legend, you know,
Yeah.
and so, but then there's the sort of but here's the budget, you know. So he, I think, kind of, I don't say did us a favor, but kind of gave us a little hookup on his rate. We did the drums up in, I want to say, it wasn't Hollywood, but it was like a north of Hollywood, like a North Hollywood suburb or something like that. That's like they had a studio that like a bunch of Halford had recorded there, and just like kind of some prominent metal people recorded there. So we did the drums there, and then everything else, guitar, vocals, bass. We went right back down to San Diego and rigged up a recording area in the garage that we wrote all the songs in. So all the guitars, bass, vocals, the noise stuff, and everything, and it was uh, set up down there. So we had this little room that was the live room, so that's where the guitars were, and then Bill set up his mixer and all his computer and everything on the other side of this wall. So it's this crappy, dusty garage with shelving, and he's sitting there with his, kind of roller chair going back and forth, and we got folding chairs all like sitting there and all crowding around, and the whole record was done that way.
Wow.
Like I think there was one instance where, like, I don't know, like his computer crashed, or there was something where we'd done the drums and we were halfway through guitar and he thought we lost the whole recording.
Oof.
And he was like, guys, I'm extremely scared right now. What's going on? It's like, I may have lost the entire recording. So he had to kind of like unhook his computer and do some sort of forensic thing, and then come back and be like, guys, we've got the recording. And we continued going on, but we had a very like nail biting couple days or whatever it was, or something like that. But,
yeah.
yeah.
So like having to sit there and redo everything you just spent all that time
including
on.
The drums, which were like done up in LA. So it was just like, oh. And at that time, like, we weren't playing to a click or anything. So a lot of that stuff is like in the moment. Like, if something turned out good, it's like, are we gonna be able to do it that way again? Because this is all okay. Everyone's playing to each other and everything. So, we were able
kind of like live tracked, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we would do it like all playing along with Mike as he was doing keeper takes up in LA.
Oh, wow.
And then we would kind of play along with him. And then we would come back later and I'd do our stuff individually. Like guitars and bass would all be just, standing behind the board, just playing, to the drum tracks. So yeah, it was interesting, but it happened. Bill's super easy to record with. He's a great guy. We still, see him occasionally in LA. He'll come out or we'll be at an event he's at. Love the dude to death. Looking back, I don't know if it was the right, we worked together really well. It wasn't that. I think it was just to put the band to where it needed to be in the death metal world, I guess. Yeah. There needed to be a little more of a modern recording. Juan Urtiaga at Trident that did Serve Man, he was much more of a modern person. I just don't think we were, prior to that, the guys were going to this guy, Jeff Forrest in El Cajon, California, Double Time. And it was very much kind of like throw some mics up, do it live. There you go. And that's one, budget constraints, and two, that's what we did. And my bands I was in before, it was the same way. It's like, just practice a bunch and get in the studio and do it the best you can. Guys, clock's running out. Better do it right the next time. That kind of stuff. So I don't know. I think Humanure, the mix itself is good. Like the instruments relative to one another is good. It just sounds a little muffled now. It just is not. There's not a very like live sound to it. It's kind of murky. But I think part of that is, I don't know. I think at the time, my thought was, guitar wise, was, more guitar tracks equals heavier, makes thicker and a bigger sound. And
Yeah.
that isn't necessarily the case. It ends up being a lot of not layering, but a lot of the same guitar tracks just make everything sound kind of chorusy, because you're never going to be, especially when it's not recorded to a click, you're never going to be on completely. So there's this kind of like haziness to where, everything, so I think, plus, I don't know, it doesn't sound like it on the recording, but I think I was using too much gain at the time. Should have backed off and just turned up my master volume, or, turned up the gain channel, whatever, fidgeted with that. I don't know. It's an album that sounds like, not, I mean, the actual audio, the sonics of it, but we were definitely trying to write longer songs. And there was this sort of thought of like, wow, this was a longer song and there's more parts. This is death metal. This is more complicated. Therefore, more complicated equals good, So, although there's still some songs on that record that I really like now to this day that I'm super into, there's a lot of it that you're like listening back and you're like, why didn't we do that part 2 more times? That's the stupidest thing. That was a good song until we did that part 2 more times. Now it's like, why are we sitting here listening to this again, or whatever? I think it was a lot of it very much, I think that, and to a certain extent the next record, Karma Bloody Karma, really was our training wheels of learning how to self-edit with songwriting. Despite having, both those records having a handful of songs on them, I think are really good. There's a lot of others that it's like, here's all these ideas from each individual. Let's try to put them all into this song. Oh, you want it to go this direction? Okay, you want it to go this direction? Well, we can accommodate both those things, and then you put it together, and it's not that like a herky jerky, like it sounds like there's too many things there. It's just like, stylistically at least, it's just like there's too many ideas, and you just need to settle on a direction and flesh it out. So I think those were a lot of sort of like learning experience. Like we've had the experience of, as a band, like some bands like knock it out of the park the first couple records, and then after that, whatever happens, us and the whole death metal world, if they're paying attention, has gotten to watch us like, oh, we're learning by doing. So I think about maybe 2000, like right around Harvest War time, I think we kind of got our groove, maybe 13 years into the band's history. So we finally kind of figured out what we're doing. Like, I mean, Mike left in 2006 or 7, and then Dave McGraw came on. So he was, very much, the sort of one of those super drummers that was just, we'd seen him play. I was like, God, this guy's unreal. Does he want to be in our band? Ooh. So he did. So I think that was a big change too. And then we just, since then, I think from like Monolith on, like we made a conscious decision after Harvest War, where like all of us felt good about it, but we're like, we want to streamline this thing. We want to just like, we're not here to, oh, here, look at this cool thing we can do. It's like, you're no longer jumping our BMX bike to impress the girls or whoever. It's like, this is, I mean, look at me. It's like, we want to be as effective as possible. It doesn't have to be short songs all the time or whatever, but it's like, this is efficiency. We need to convey as much as we can, but make it super compact and just songs. These are songs. This isn't just like, okay, what are we doing here? It's like part of it, like you look back at like certain classic death metal recordings and you're like, it's like, okay, this is a classic record, but where the heck are half these songs going? It's like, what the heck's even happening here? We didn't, and at that point we're just like, we don't want to be that band. We don't want to have like, oh, there's like 3 or 4 banger songs in this, but the rest of it's just kind of like, who wrote these? Is it just cut and paste, patching stuff together, just for the sake of making a record? It's like, we're like, no, I want longevity and to come back to each, of course there's always going to be songs that stick out a little more than others, but like we just wanted the records to be like, you could hit shuffle and hit a random track and be like, there's longevity to that song regardless of which one you hit. There's key elements, there's parts, there's stuff that's enough, I don't know what you'd want to say, just kind of
variation,
just, that, but also just sort of these key elements of what people grab onto, as far
Yeah.
as, it's just stuff that's like, all these just keystones and hallmarks. Each song has this thing to it. You know what I mean? So we really, really, really got a lot more self-critical in songs, like structure and just riffs and everything. And went with Dave Otero to record the past, well, since Monolith.
Yeah.
And he was a much more modern producer. And, we used Billy Anderson for a couple records. Billy's awesome. Love Billy. He did Karma and Harvest Floor with us. But then I think after that, we're kind of ready to, let's just try a super clean record, let's get like some guy who can do immaculate stuff. And we went with Dave Otero, and he can do, I mean, some of the records he's done just sound, they're the cleanest sounding things ever. But when we talked to him initially about recording with him, he's like, well, you guys aren't the band that needs this robot production. He goes, yeah, it's going to be clean. I'll make sure it's clean, but it's not going to be this, kind of thing. He goes, you got to have some life. And he goes, you guys have a little swing here and there, so I'm going to keep that element. So he's done a really good job at kind of having a super modern, clean recording, but not falling off the cliff and making it like this sterile,
Yeah.
everything's so hard edited, bells and whistles kind of thing. So going from To Serve Man and then with Humanure with Bill, then Karma, Harvest Floor, and then from Monolith the present, it's been this sort of steady, kind of progression. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's kind of important to look back on it, with like different viewpoints of like, here's where we're at now, here's where we were. We learn from all these mistakes, and that's, or not even mistakes, just like we learn from doing.
We just got better at what we did. Yeah. It's like with Humanure, like I think that's almost like that and Karma are kind of like, because people can look at like Harvest Floor and be like, oh, that's where I started paying attention or whatever. But like, usually To Serve Man, people are like, oh, that's where I first heard you guys, because you were on some like Metal Blade compilation. I didn't really like it, and then but then I started paying attention at Harvest Floor. So Humanure and Karma get kind of like, I don't want to say like lost records, but like people just don't ever talk about them. There's a couple of friends that we have that like will say like Humanure is my favorite one, but I think it's one of those like, and no offense to their preference for that record, but it's more like when you jump on with a band, that's always going to be kind of your sentimental favorite. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think that might be the case with that. But I think, I don't know, like I haven't gone back in a while and listened to those, or occasionally, like strangely enough, like if like there's a venue that's using like, I don't know, one of those online metal stations to basically do their in-between band, like
changeover stuff,
in between changeover music or something like that.
Yeah.
Occasionally it won't be a recent song of ours. It'll be like a Humanure song. I'm like, unrolling cable. Be kidding me. And then just keep going. It's weird because you just don't, very few people talk about those two records, so it's just kind of this weird thing when you hear it and you're like, oh, interesting. I don't know. It's I would still like, and Travis and I kind of go back and forth about this here and there, like it'd be kind of cool like to go back and play a couple of those songs, like bring a couple of them back that we think like, oh, this is a good song, actually, I'd love to play this. And anytime we've tried to do with her, I don't know, say with Humanure, but say certain Man songs, or maybe a couple songs off Karma that people really say, oh, we want to hear it. Anytime you relearn those songs and play them, you get blank stares from everyone. And people are like, is that a new song? I'm like, no, that song's 25 years old, but no. Oh, really? I was going to say, it didn't sound like something you guys would write now. I'm like, no, it's a 25-year-old song. So it's kind of like, well,
I get that for sure. Your songwriting has evolved so much over all this time that like anything off To Serve Man doesn't sound like anything that you would write now. It's almost like like you're saying, it's a different person, but
it's the execution would be our nowadays execution, but it's like you want to say, it's like, yeah, for, I don't know, say like our spiritual purposes, we want to do it again, to like, I'd love to play some of those songs again, but like for general audience and stuff like that, the vast majority are going to be like, what in the world is this? You know? And for
That makes sense.
for the four people in the back that are like, yeah, man, I can't believe they're doing this. Everyone else would just be like, yeah, everyone else would be like, this reduced to what? You know? So I don't know. It's and I'm fortunate though that we do have, like, we were actually discussing this because we're writing a set for our tour that we're doing next month.
Mhm.
And we're playing a few songs we haven't played in a few years. It was the sort of discussion of just like, are we gonna like, I mean, are people going to recognize this song? We haven't done it for years. It's like, well, it was one of our biggest songs, circa, uh, you know, 5 years ago or 6 years ago. It was all over the place, and we haven't done it for a while. So it's, it's not, you're not like you're reaching way back and doing like,
Right.
deep cuts on the Sir Man or something like that. As much as I would like to do a few of those, that'd be fun. But, and plus it's like, we all live all over the place now and we have limited amounts of time. So you got to think, do we really want to put a bunch of time into relearning like semi-obscure songs for, one, people who won't care, and two, when we could be writing material or relearning a relatively recent song that we just haven't played live yet, which is something we're doing for the next tour. We're just learning. It's a song of Terrorist Light we haven't played live yet. So,
Which one is it?
I can't say anything. And by that I mean, yes, I'm very sure. And
Okay.
if we somehow go, man, we can't do this. I said,
Oh yeah, that's true. That's fair.
We should be able to do it. It's not that. It's not like, not some sort of technical anything. It's just like sometimes stuff you just try to go do again. You're like, I like that song, but I don't know what it is. It just, or we do it like once or twice live, and then just for some reason it feels like it's killing the set because people are kind of like, oh, this isn't one of the three that you had a video with or whatever, So I don't know. I like the song a lot. I think it's great, but it's fun. But we'll see.
Yeah, I was. I think I was telling you this when I met you at the tour with Fred and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
and is a very important record to me. It's one of my gateway records. It's exactly like you said. I had that song on that Metal Blade compilation,
Mm-hmm.
and I immediately was like, "What is this? I need to go buy it."
Mm-hmm.
And
What
I
was the? Do you
couldn't.
remember what was the song that was on there? Do you remember?
Uh, I'm pretty sure it was. I know the fucking guitar riff. I don't know why I'm like blanking on the name. It's like jun, 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 jun.
Oh, sorry, man. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the title. Okay, the title
yeah. The
track.
title
Yeah,
track. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. It was that song on
Mm-hmm.
there, and I couldn't buy it because I was not 18. I had to get my older cousins to
Oh,
go
because
buy the
the
record for me.
cover. Yeah.
Yep. Parental
Mm-hmm.
advisory. And then, man, when my
Mm-hmm.
dad saw that, he was like, "What is this?"
Mm-hmm.
I went to him. I had to play the record for him, and he was like, "How can you
Oh
even
no.
understand anything that's going on?" 'Cause, I grew up in the South. Like
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
know, my dad's not really, but he was still just kind of like, "What are you doing? What is this?"
yeah. What are you doing with this crap? Yeah, it's when I. That was like my parents when they went and they were like, "Oh, he's in this band that's on some bigger independent label." I guess. I mean, I guess this is for real now. It's not just his bands. He's been, his garage bands basically been playing for years.
Yeah,
So they went to Best Buy and bought it or something like that. My mom was just kind of, let's go buy my son's record, that kind of thing. It's adorable, whatever. But she did that, and I just remember my dad like talking to him on the phone. He's just like, "Yeah, your mom bought that record, so we're like, take it out of the thing and put it in the stereo in the car, and just a bunch of banging and yelling and roaring, and I don't know what the heck that music is." And I'm like, it's not for you. It's fine.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. But then I think, like with them, it's funny because like it took. I think like we were like, maybe there was we were covered, like I think it was like CNN had like some entertainment thing,
Hmm.
and they were like, I think this was maybe 2008 2009, something like maybe around that time period, and they had a special like, environmentalism and entertainment or something like that, and so they had on their music page they had this picture of us standing there. And they interviewed us. Travis did some short little, kind of thing, commentary, question answer thing for him. And then my parents saw that and they're like, "Oh crap!" I think
Yeah.
it took a long time for them to realize it was a real thing and not just like some, glorified hobby or whatever. So it was just kind of funny. And over the years, it's like, oh, there's this newspaper article that mentions your band, and I saw a kid with one of your shirts on at Walmart, that kind of thing. So it's just these, they live in kind of an isolated place in northern Wisconsin, so they don't see too much of it. But they've had neighbors whose like kids like are into the band and stuff like that, which is always kind of weird. So it's kind of neat.
That's so
Yeah.
funny. That's fun
Yeah.
too, though, that they're supportive of it, because they
Fine.
could just be like, no thanks.
They were that way for many years. It was always this sort of like, it's not too late to go to grad school,
Oh yeah.
or whatever, which is true. But it's fine that they're like, oh, well, he's never asked us for a loan or bail him out of anything. Oh, okay, well, I guess he's thrifty. This is doing something, I guess. So, yeah, they're enough to sustain me, I guess.
Um, one other thing about Humanure, you guys worked or had members of the Locust on that record
Yes.
as well, right? You guys have
Mm-hmm.
been friends with them for like ever and have done like
Yep.
little mesh
Yep.
bands, correct?
Yep. Gabe Serbian and Dave Astor were members of the Locust.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember who was in it because
yeah, Gabe Serbian played guitar in Locust, and Dave Astor was playing drums. Then Dave Astor quit the Locust to do Cattle full time, and Gabe switched to drums from guitar. When Cattle first started, Gabe was on drums, Dave Astor was on bass, Travis played guitar and sang. And then they switched again, Dave on drums, Gabe on guitar, Travis doing just vocals. So there was a 3-piece for the first 2 records, Human Jerky and Humanure. Then Troy joined, and then I joined, and then Serban came out like maybe 8 months later, 6 to 8 months later after that.
wow.
So yeah, it was a lot of juggling early on with members and everything. But yeah, Gabe and Dave were in the Locust, and we're still, Gabe's passed on, and
Yeah.
so unfortunately, but we actually, it's interesting in life how sometimes it takes these things to kind of everyone gets perspective. But when Gabe passed away, they had a memorial for him, little after the fact or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was people from the San Diego area, mostly friends. It was maybe some family there, but it was mostly just, people. And because he'd been in so many bands and had been worked at so many local, like record stores or whatever, and just everyone knew him, So it was just a collection of those people, coming to remember him. And Travis was there at this thing. And so was Dave Astor. And they hadn't spoken in years. Because, it was kind of a little bit not the friendliest party, back, 2003. And there have been some, sporadic over the years sniping back and forth about, whatever. But this was the first time when it was kind of like, oh, this is something bigger than our whatever beef we may have between each other. This is our friend that's passed on. We're here to kind of, in his memory, basically. And so they just started talking and, kind of, how many years had gone by and how much life had gone by and experiences. And they kind of were like, oh, well, here's 2 people right now who really, at this point in time have nothing against one another. And they kind of reconnected a little bit. You know what I mean? As of, I think we played in San Diego, this was like almost a year ago, on our tour that we were with Immolation and Sam Superbar and Castrator, that one we did.
Okay.
We played at the Observatory in San Diego, and he came out, and I hadn't seen him in, I think I may have walked past him outside of a show in 2005. Wow. It'd been that long, and I talked to him. He brought his son, his teenage son, and we just kind of like very friendly. How are you doing? What you been up to? It was a very like, this extension of, someone you'd known years ago that, we finally all kind of loosely, however you define it, grown up to a certain extent. So now, 2 adults talking to one another and him with his teenage son and everything like that. And just really kind of, we're like, oh, wow, now we can be separated from the emotional stuff from back then, and now we can just be two rational adults that are just interested in what the other person's doing and hoping, wishing each other well and everything. So that was a really nice thing to do. I'm sorry that it had to take Gabe passing for that to happen, or it may have happened organically aside from that, but that was the impetus, to us to kind of, be in contact, again. So that was kind of a nice thing to not that it was keeping anyone up at night on either party, I'm sure, but just stuff that's like, it's past. We're done with that part of our lives, and we can just be cool, and that's pretty valuable.
Just that perspective of it, like, why are we wasting energy on, disliking each other when our friend is gone and we were all friends? And grow up. Let's grow up.
Yeah, exactly. So Gabe and Dave were the original dudes, and we've had that relationship with the Locust forever. Justin Pearson still, San Diego folk, Bobby Bray, same deal. Joey, he's been in Long Beach for I don't know how many years, forever. So he's, Long Beach area and stuff like that. But we see, like I said, I don't live in San Diego anymore, but anytime I'm back, I usually run into JP once, nice. So I don't see Robbie very much, or or Joey, since he's up in LA area, but we're still a very close band. We're very closely aligned with them, and I know a lot of metal folks don't get the Locust, but they're an incredible band. They're an incredible band. Like, I don't see, if you're into aggressive music at all, I don't see how you can see, you may not be like, oh, I'm going to put this on right now, but you can't, I don't see how you can not look at that and just be like, this is pretty incredible. This is amazing. It's like, it's kind of a mind blower, to watch. So I don't know. It's just, that band is, it's not going to be, is no longer around. So
yeah. So there's one last little thing I want to touch on.
Sure.
Funny, and it's a good segue, talking about personal growth and everything.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I remember, and this was probably around the time of Humanure and To Serve Man, maybe Karma Bloody Karma even.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, I'm sure you've talked about this, but you had the shirts, the Gore Not Core stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how was it all like a tongue-in-cheek thing, like, like, we really don't care about the core, but we're doing this to like get a rise out of people? Or was there like a little bit of intentionality of like, no, we actually hate like metalcore, deathcore, and all this stuff that's coming up?
I mean, I think for me, I just didn't, it's music I didn't really pay attention to. I mean, you had to. I mean, if you're in this industry, how many bands on Metal Blade at that time were definitely right up that alley? Or, our contemporaries, bands you ended up touring with or whatever. So it's not like you could ignore it and just act like whatever. Right. It wasn't what I would choose to listen to recreationally. But I think because it was so, like, if you came up in early death metal times, it seemed like, that the cycles go. I'm sure the thrash guys thought all the same thing about death metal and grindcore. They're like, what is this noise or whatever? But like, for us, it was just like, what is this kind of like fashionable young person drop tune? What is this? I don't know if it's an evolution of like that sort of lack of tolerance for new genres, or I mean, I know with Travis, he just genuinely hated that type of music. I just didn't listen to it or really care about it, but he was like a deep.
Didn't want anything to do with
it. So the Gore Not Core thing was kind of like, we're into death metal and grindcore, gore grind, all that stuff. So that's our side of the fence, and the deathcore or metalcore at that time, because it was that time period prior to the kind of deathcore thing, prior to Job and all those bands. That's what it was more like directed at. Because Job for a Cowboy, like, those dudes are our friends. They were our friends.
Right.
like that. Maybe not. We don't sound anything like them, but we toured with them and enough where you could like, oh, hey, let me get Bobby on the phone just to talk shit to him or whatever, stuff like that. So it wasn't like this super contentious, bad relationship or anything like that. I think it was more of like the stereotypical kind of swoopy haired, metalcore bands, tight fancy kind of stuff, So I think it was more about that um, than what came after. But it was actually our friend, a different JP, different, one JP, different JP. He had a band called what was it called? No Policy, I want to say. And on his arm, he had the tattoo that is that Gornat core, like that little logo.
Okay.
And we're like, that's kind of cool. It's like, can we use that for something? He's like, sure, man. He's friends with the band. He's like, sure, man. Yeah, just use it for whatever you want. My band's been broken up for years. I just was an idiot and got a tattoo of my old band, So we kind of copied that sort of logo, and then that went on the shirts, Gornat core, or at least the little guy that crossed out.
The guy, yeah.
Yeah, that was his tattoo. So we took that and then added the Gornat core with the drip logo and all that stuff. So it's we get people asking us to redo that shirt. I was like, oh, I gotta redo that shirt, man. Do like a 20th anniversary kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember, I funny personally. I didn't care either way, even if it was a serious thing, and that's how the band really felt. But the thing that I was kind of getting at is like you evolved, you've grown as people, and you tour with all different genre of metal.
It's like yeah,
it can't
if bands
be
had a tour
serious.
Exactly. If bands could only tour with bands they like, no one would ever tour ever.
Right.
Or a band like that. Oh, I would listen to their CD or whatever, their music. It's just like, especially for like Travis and I we have, not that we have super obscure tastes or whatever, but it's like, yeah, I don't pay a ton of attention to new stuff that comes out, at least not in the genres that would be able to tour with, or that would like bands that we play with, I listen to stuff where it's like, oh, it's one guy in a basement in unpronounceable name, Scandinavia, that kind of thing. It's nothing we're ever going to tour with or anything like that. So I don't know. It's I think that was definitely a point in our history where it was more like a little bit sort of snot-nosed antagonism kind of thing,
Sure. That's kind of why I wanted to touch on it, because it was around that time, and I felt like it was sort of part of the band's identity for a little while, and then it was
and it was a way, not, I don't want to say this was like our pure motivation, but like, there was a lot of more traditional straight up death metal people that were like, the Locust, aren't those tight jeans, like white belt, isn't Cattle like friends with them? So they just lumped us in with whatever they thought Locust is. Oh, they're a core band. I'm like, absolutely not. Locust is not a core band in any way. Okay. So, but then mentally that was this box that we were put in. So when those people kind of lumped us in with all these, metalcore bands, we're like, oh, no. And I think that merch was, based on our friend's tattoo, but kind of born out of like our desire to not be lumped in with those, bands, and to be, a couple of our members are like, I can't stand that stuff. So it's just like compounded that sort of desire to want to do that. So it was a funny thing. We had shirts and I think vinyl stickers and stuff for a while and everything, probably at some point in time, and maybe a patch or something. But yeah, there's certain people, that's the glory days of this band. So fans that are like, I want to see that all back. I want that era of the band back. Or it was like play in Southern California and do really well, maybe up the West Coast, maybe do one US tour and stuff like that. And that's the era they want,
Yeah, bands can't stay that way forever, man. They gotta evolve. They gotta.
Yeah, you have to. If you're any sort of musician, I don't care what type of music you play. It's like, if you're not doing something, it doesn't have to be. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do a record. But like,
right.
If you got to be evolving within yourself or within what your band is doing at some point, or it's just like, what are you doing? You're basically going to be a cover band for your own band for the end of your days. So many bands, like, basically, like, oh, like I said, like, maybe their first 2 records did really well, and then they're basically trying to rewrite those records for the next 20 years, and I don't know. I think we've competed with ourselves by not trying to compete with our past records and just kind of like just doing what we're, whatever the natural evolution is of things, just to put out new material. And it's like, oh, what is he into now? Is he into this? Okay, we'll probably hear some of that on the record. That'll kind of bleed through in a way that he'll hear it. Maybe one other person in the band will hear it. Everyone else will be like, all right, it's just a new cattle song. And if it's a particular member, like, oh, it's totally a so-and-so part right here. It's usually not a metal band at all, or something. So
yeah, Yeah, I love when bands like kind of eschew like the normal metal influences and like start putting in other stuff that you wouldn't expect, like new wave or you know,
Oh, dude, myself and
whatever.
I mean, yeah, Travis has been. I mean, Travis and I have been into it for a lot of years, but Bell's been into it the past few years too. Like just all the dark wave stuff that's been coming out the past few years. Like,
Hmm.
just saying, next record,
Yeah, yeah, man,
just a
I've
little bit. So if you hear it, you'll be like, you can harken back and go, you mentioned something about that.
that's awesome.
Yeah, there's
Me
actually
too, man. Oh,
this the other night. They're from Boston, but they played here in Berlin last Saturday, the 7th. This band House of Harm.
okay.
Just kind of like it's very kind of like yeah, dark wavy, dancey, like The Cure, but way more aggressive. At
Yeah.
times, just and they killed it. They sounded incredible. It was three dudes, two guitar player, singer. They alternate with keyboards, drum machine for drums, of course. But man, they sounded great. Bought a hoodie, not this one, but
Yeah.
yeah, bought a hoodie, and yeah, they were awesome. So that's
I'm up because
that's something.
super. I mean, the new Cure record was like my favorite record of the year.
Oh, I
That's
haven't
not
even.
metal,
Yeah,
you know.
I haven't heard. I need to listen to more new music. Like I
Yeah.
realized that's one thing that I'm like, man, I used to just casually search for stuff all the time, and oh, let's do this and that. There's even some bands that I consider my favorites that I haven't heard their new record that's been out for what 8 months now. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I should
I
listen to
mean,
that.
dude, you've been busy, you know?
Yeah, well, this year is like I feel that we've we've kind of had a block of not a lot of stuff going on. Like we did we had a European tour in like March,
Hmm.
and then we had Chaos and Carnage, which was May, June,
Yeah.
and then we had other than that, we had a one-off at Rockstadt in Romania at the end of July, and then in November, early November, we did Bogota and Mexico City,
Damn.
and that's it this year.
Oh,
There should have
how
been
you?
one more tour in. There should have been one more tour in there, but there wasn't.
Okay.
So next year we have the thing in late January that's here in Europe, and then we have some fests we're doing in Europe in June. This is like the front half of the fest season, not like the Baca and stuff, the Hellfest and Grass Pop and that kind of stuff. And then potentially a tour. This is very hazy at the end, a U.S. tour at the end of next year, and we're supposed to be writing a record right now too. So there's that.
Yeah. So
So
see, that's busy. I don't
so
know.
there's about three tours. I mean, as far as we know, two confirmed, one hazy talk. But apparently that's because of the way things are going now, according to our management. They're like, yeah, they're starting to book tours now for like beginning of 2026. And so
That's
you have to think
crazy.
strategically, you have to think that far ahead. So you're like, okay, if we release this record then it's going to take X amount of months to manufacture it, then it will be released then. So by the time we do it, that's actually the tour that we've been offered will be the second tour of that cycle, but it's in the US. But our last tour ended 2 months ago. We can't do that because and you have to be thinking years ahead. So it's almost
Yeah.
like you have to draw this chart out. I mean, everything just keeps getting farther in advance. Like when you release a record, it's not going to be out for 9 months after you hand it in.
Yeah. You know what? Actually, speaking of that, how do you feel about this current cycle? I don't know if you guys follow this, but where it's like, the albums, the band puts a single out for, whenever they put it out, and then like a month later, there's another one, and then a month later, there's another one, and by the time the record comes out, you've heard half the record, and it's
Oh,
like,
that's
well, I've already heard this, like,
yeah. That's the thing is like, I mean, we used to do like prior to there'd always be okay. Here's the first song for the record, and then the record's out. Maybe the second one, and then the record's out. So you've only heard like one or two songs off the record that comes out,
which is perfect. That I don't
which
need
is
more than that.
perfect. You need little teasers, yeah. I want to say with Terrasite, what was the first song? Oh, Scourge the Offspring, I think. And then, or was that the first song? Weed Are Young was the first song.
That sounds right.
Weed Are Young was the first song, then Scourge, and then Soul Nostalgia was the Aphotic Doom and then Soul Nostalgia. But I think the record was out. I think there was 2 songs plus videos, and then the record came out. And I think Aphotic Doom came out like when the record came out, and then Soul Nostalgia came out after.
Yeah.
Yes, to the point you made, it was been suggested to us that we kind of follow the same thing, like record a record, and then they leak the songs out digitally, just online. What year is it? I don't know. I have a record player. I don't know anything. Do you have a wooden spool? That's how I operate. You'll do basically almost 4 singles, and then the record comes out. So, and you can leak those out prior, while all the things we manufactured and everything. So all formats released at the same time. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that as a music fan. I just don't consume music that way. Like, cool, like you said, 1 or 2 songs, great. That's a good teaser. Taste. Well, what's this going to be like? And then you get the bulk of the record. But just by the time you get it, it's like, well, I've heard half the record already, and it's like then that kind of detracts from like our desire to have like song order is super important. In a record, it's not just mishmash of hit shuffle on the CD player. There is a thought process. There is peaks and valleys, ebb and flow of how this needs to be. And, I know singles all kind of throw that out the window, or whatever songs you're releasing. But at the same time, it's just like, I don't know. It just seems like it's another layer of
feed the machine,
taking away the heart and like the drama of like releasing a record and then having that as a singular experience of listening to the album versus like, well, we have to do things this way now because this is the way people consume things, because no one has any, here I go sounding like, an aged person, but like, yeah, no one has any attention span anymore. So they're not going to sit there for a whole record. And if you don't have a video to go with that song, it might as well not even exist. And this is another sort of sad, funny thing. I want to say Whitechapel did this. They had a song that had been on a record, that the record had been out like a year and a half, and they just decided to make a video for that song and put it out. And the majority of people didn't know it was a new, or just thought it was a brand new song because they'd only paid attention to the singles. So I'm not dogging Whitechapel for doing that.
No, I get what you're
smart,
saying.
On that. That's totally like, strategic move.
That's
but
so crazy.
It's like these people like are fans and they don't know what songs are on the record because they've only like seen the ones of the videos or whatever. And so, I mean, for a band, you're kind of like, oh shit, we can get some mileage out of this thing. Just release a deep cut and 2 years in as a, but by that time you've exhausted your money that you have to put towards those sort of things. So it has to be kind of a right time, place, sort of thing. Like right now, if we wanted to do a video for, I don't know what song off Terracite, we could do it, but it'd be out of our own pockets. We wouldn't have any money for, it's not like, oh, the label's getting you money to do a video or something like that. No, it'd be a pet project and it'd be like us self-funding it. And no, not right now,
Can't be worth it in this day and age.
I mean, maybe it's like if we had the right, I mean, like we used Dave Brodsky, the Brodskys did our last few videos and they did a fantastic job on all of them. So we'd love to use them, but it'd be something like we probably would have to like find someone else because we wouldn't have enough money, for them to, be able worth their while to do it, so right. I don't know, but that's another approach, release a song that's been on your record that's not one of the 3 or 4 that you release and just like, oh, check this shit out, so I don't know. I'm very much on the fence about that. It just keeps changing too. Like between beginning of your cycle and the end of your cycle, which I've told you can't think of the cycles anymore because that's a record label constructed sort of thought process or whatever. So I shouldn't say that cycles anymore, but like as you go through your cycle, it's just weird how you have to think about these things. Like you may change the beginning of that cycle to the end of the cycle. Like there may be a whole different way of consumption. Like, before it's like, oh, we're going to do singles with a video and then release the album, and then by the end of that, it may be like, well, that's not a thing anymore. You do. Are we back to making of videos? Does people like making of videos? Do a making of video that's this long thing, and then at the end of it, debut the new song with a video, or whatever. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up at this point, but it's like
Yeah.
there's always going to be a new method of delivery that is somehow more efficient than the last based on how people are consuming. But it's so you're having to have these, I don't want to say knee jerk, but these responses to a current consumption trend that you have to try to project and apply to how you're going to do things months, if not a year plus down the road. So is that even going to be a thing at that point? Is that even going to be something a way people can consume? So, I mean, there's one sense that you may be just going like, well, screw that. I'm just going to stick the tried and true way. Well, maybe that's not the best idea anymore. But I know there's got to be some sort of, brilliant Svengali type person that can like project, how people are going to, consume stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I was talking with Fred about this the other day, and like there's been a couple bands recently that have just dropped like surprise EPs and surprise records.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing, just like here it is.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, that's because they're at that level where they can just do that. Like they
Mm-hmm.
have those bands already built in. They don't need to like slow release stuff to build up the hype. They can just go, here
Yep.
it is. And I was like, oh yeah, they know what they can get out of surprise releasing something versus a
Yes.
band who has to work up to it. So
Yeah.
that's a
It could
whole nother
be,
thing.
yeah. If they know that they can get that, response, and then like, oh, well, it's an excuse to do a tour. We can do a tour, play a couple of these new songs, and then, whatever. That's great. I mean, I don't think we could do that.
Yeah. Might be able
It's
to.
there was well,
Surprise
there was
EP.
actually there was a discussion. This has been abandoned, but there was a discussion maybe like 6 months to a year ago of like, should we do like an EP, like two or
Mm-hmm.
three new songs and like a couple covers or something?
Oh,
Like
that'd be
make
sick,
them really
actually.
non-conventional covers where it's not like blast beats, we're gonna make
Yeah.
it heavier, dumb shit, but just do our spin on it, but do like we did that Dead Can Dance cover for Death Atlas, something like that, where it's just like, okay, it's our kind of interpretation of this song. That was discussed to do an EP, and then it was sort of like, well, if we're going to be in the studio for that much time, if it's X amount of songs, we're still going to have to be in there for a month plus.
Mm.
Why not just go and do a whole record if we're going to have? Because when we're at De Botero's, we're there for 2 months.
Oh,
Like it's
really?
2 months out of your year that you are in the studio.
Wow.
It's a lot. So the thought with the EP is like, well, you're already in there for a month, probably like 5 weeks. Why not just go the extra 3 weeks and do a whole record out of it instead of? So it just became one of those discussions. So I don't know. I'm still. It's like if we had the spare time or whatever, it would be cool to throw like an EP together or do like a covers record and make it like an EP or something like that. Like
Yeah.
not a ton of songs, maybe 6, 7 songs or something like that. But once again, that's time away from writing your own new material or time away from touring and all that. And it's like, I don't know. It's
It's a little
finding time
bit
is
indulgent
keeps getting harder
project,
and
but
harder. Exactly.
be
Yeah.
fun.
It'd
Be
probably be
fun.
fun. Yeah. It's just some of our like that Dead Can Dance cover I thought turned out
Yeah.
incredible. And
Yeah.
like definitely not something people would expect from us. And um yeah, it was I would love to do that, but once again, it's like you said, kind of indulgent, and then we have other like kind of more real world stuff that we need to do and be attending to. So
Well, Josh, we have been going for 2 hours, so
oh geez. Okay. Well,
awesome. I
sorry.
don't want to take up more of your time.
Oh, that's fine. Sorry, I probably went on like 20-minute tangents
No,
about
man.
guitar magazines and stuff.
I do not care about time. I'm more worried about like taking up your time. That's the main thing
No,
here.
all good. All good. Of
Um, but yeah, dude, seriously, thank you for taking the time to do this. I really, really
course.
appreciate it.
Anytime.
Man, wealth of knowledge. We got some good stuff.
Okay,
I
good.
love
Yeah, I
hearing
hope
about
you can
Humanure.
weed through some of that and edit my ums and ands and you know,
Absolutely
to,
can.
my little turns that went nowhere, on
Yeah,
all that because I'm kind of one of those story time guys. So
I love it. No, that's what I look for, man. I just want to hear those stories and get those things out of people because sometimes, I have people who just give me one word answers, and I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
You're giving me nothing here.
But yeah, man, that's all I got. And I'm actually gonna save this for the new year because I know going into the holidays, nobody's
Yeah, of course. Thank
fucking.
you, sir. I appreciate it. Yeah, take it easy, man. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you so much for checking the episode out. If you liked it, please hit like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify or listening on iTunes or watching on Spotify, wherever you consume podcasts, please consider giving a rating. Follow me on social media, Heavy Metal History Podcast. You can find me on Instagram. That's pretty much all I got left. I don't really do any other social media for the podcast. I don't really feel the need for it, but if you want to interact, you can give me suggestions, tell me what I fucked up. It's all good. Anyways, I thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.